Alicia N. She just wanted to introduce herself to everybody. Alicia N.
Yes, I asked
Um,
all the guests to put their name and organizational affiliation in the chat, just so we have a record. So thank you.
Perfect. So folks, please keep introducing yourself if you're not part of the commission on the chat, just so we know who you are, and welcome. A happy new year to everyone. We're starting off a new year with the commission. The way we've done these meetings traditionally is that guests are invited to come and observe, but they might not necessarily participate. But if your comments are in the chat, we'll be able to see them, and one of the commissioners or myself might be able to lift that up to make sure we include that in the conversation. We just want to make sure, because it's such a large body, that all of us have a chance to share with each other. Also, if you're not speaking, please remember to mute your microphone, just because Zoom continues to befuddle us. We're also on Zoom for the first time and not on Microsoft Teams, so this should allow us to see everyone's lovely faces all at the same time. So, unless, feel free to keep your cameras on even if you're not speaking. I know that folks have babies and fur babies and all sorts of other things going on around them. So we'll totally understand if you need to step away to take care of that. But as much as we can be present here, that would be fantastic. I want to sort of start off tonight's meeting thinking back on what we've accomplished so far and what we have coming up ahead. And I think a good place to do that might be to look at the survey that all of you took. There were a number of really great findings in there, and we'll have a chance for reflections if people want to share. But what really stood out to me was how folks felt that a sense of purpose being part of the commission, they felt that they were included, that their voice was being heard. And that's something that I really, really value. A number of folks commented on how we've been able to develop a good rapport working with each other, and we've really developed a great sense of collegiality, which are both going to be really, really important, especially considering we've just set up the subcommittees, we've set up these structures, we're heading into doing some meaty work for the first time. And I don't need to tell anyone here that now is sort of when a lot of the more difficult conversations will take place, and we'll be relying on the trust that we've developed over our work together so far to carry us through some conversations that are bound to be very difficult. As folks have already observed, it is a very, very strange time. I was thinking through what it means for our work on the commission. It's not within the scope of our work to deal with all of white supremacy or all of democratic institutions, but I think we do have to confront it in as much as it relates to policing. And this past week, we've both seen how the presence and quick thinking and the duty of police officers was really able to save lives. And we've seen some really disturbing questions about why the police were not able to do what they were supposed to have done in this situation, and all sorts of different takes on what that means for potential infiltration of white supremacy within certain units, topics that have come up in our conversations and the articles we've been sharing back and forth in the past. What I'm really aware of and grateful for is the immense amount of expertise and experience in this virtual room. We all come at this work with a ton of experience. We've had a chance to take part in the Citizens Academy. And if you haven't had a chance to review all the sessions, please make sure you do so by the end of the month. And I think that's going to be very valuable. What I was also reflecting on is all of our combined experience was not able to prevent some very tragic deaths at the hands of officers within our own community. It was not able to prevent the disparities, the racial disparities in traffic stops, in arrests by school resource officers, all the other statistics we've seen. So I want to both take advantage of all the knowledge we have in this room and also approach this work with a sense of humility, given that none of us clearly have had the right answer so far. And that's part of what we're trying to figure out together. So on that note, let's kick off the new year. I think we'll start with a few administrative items. We're going to start off with a review of the minutes, if there are any edits to that. I believe all of you have had a chance to review them. For voting, I'm going to switch over to voting directly in the chat, just so it's easier for Carlos to keep track, so we don't have to look at everyone's hands being raised. So all those in favor of approval, first let me ask if there are any edits to the minutes from our December meeting. Seeing those there are none, all those, if you want to vote in favor, just vote aye or yes. If you want to oppose, no or nay. And if you want to abstain, I guess you don't need to vote, but if you could just put that into the chat. I'm seeing mostly ayes and yeses, and I believe we probably have quorum, so the minutes are passed and will be entered onto the website. Just a reminder to share subcommittee meeting times and minutes, so those can be posted on the website. Real big thanks to Carlos and his team for making sure the website carries a lot of our information, so it's available to the public. So if you haven't already done so, make sure to send the minutes that way. And we're asking right now for all subcommittees to have at least one open monthly meeting that folks can attend, especially members of the public. We had some really great responses on the Google feedback form that was sent out just to the commissioners. As I mentioned, some really great feedback on the work of the commission and how we're working with each other. We also had some great input on the public comment form, which has now gone live. And all the data requests that have been submitted to MCPD have been returned. And Carlos has done a great job of cataloging those on our internal Microsoft Teams. Any comments or questions about any of those items?
Yeah, I have a question about the necessity for the subcommittees to meet monthly in a public way. So how would you or Carlos like us to schedule that and to give notice of that?
So we have some information on what times work for different members back when we were trying to schedule these meetings. So if it's helpful, myself or Carlos can look back at those and find times that the different members of your subcommittee have indicated they're available. If that time still works, we can go ahead and schedule that as a recurring monthly meeting. So I guess that's more about the mechanics of it, but to the point of necessity, I'd suppose we're trying to be as transparent as we can. We're mindful that a lot of the work happening over email, because it falls under quorum, will not be seen by the public. So just to make sure that the public is having some opportunity to see those deliberations in real time, we wanted to open those subcommittee meetings for everyone to look at.
Yeah, that's having the meetings open and being transparent is not my question. My question is really very administrative and mundane. We probably need Carlos to let us know how he will give notice to the public, how much time he needs in order to do that in advance as we schedule these meetings. We also need to know if the subcommittees are going to meet on a regular, like on a routine basis. The subcommittees themselves need to coordinate so that we're not all trying to meet, on the same 2 days, right? So, that's the very administrative kind of thing that has to happen. That's what I'm asking about.
Sure thing. So I apologize if this wasn't clear. I was under the understanding that most subcommittees were either meeting on a monthly basis or trying to find a time that would work for everyone already. And that would just be a recurring monthly meeting. And if that were the case, we wouldn't really need to, we would be able to give a month's notice in advance because we'd know it's the X Thursday at so-and-so PM. So that's sort of the notice concern.
Can I ask a
Go ahead,
question
Robin.
about that?
Yeah.
I don't want to overburden Carlos either, because Carlos, do you need to be there to run a Zoom meeting?
No. So for this to work administratively, honestly, just I think the Open Meetings Act is pretty broad in terms of the amount of time you need to post to a public place. So it's basically just as soon as practicable. So as soon as you know the date of your meeting, you can set up a Zoom link, send that to me, and then I will post it to the PAC website. And that's where the public notice will be. So like any information will just be posted there. But I don't have to be part of the meeting. You can set up your own Zoom link and just send it to me when it's ready to go, and I'll post it. That's it.
Okay,
Mine are sorry,
Good,
Chair.
no, and you can assure that, we don't have subcommittees meeting at the same time, for the purpose of the public might want to attend more than one subcommittee meeting. So I'm asking you to basically be the traffic cop, to make sure that we are not meeting, in conflict with each other. That's the other part of the administrative function I'm asking about.
There's one more thing, which is that Zoom, unless you have a pro Zoom account, your meetings for 3 or more people are limited to 40 minutes. So I'm not quite sure how to deal with that.
Yeah, can I speak? Just
Sure.
Go ahead, yeah.
because I think that we've been pretty successful, the hiring and discipline subcommittee. I went ahead and got my own Zoom account. I had it for other things, and I just I use it for this for our meetings. And yet it's not a large expense. It's pretty minimal expense a month, and a licensed quote unquote account in order to go beyond the 45 or so minutes. But
So
I between
think we
the
have
members, if you wanted them to contribute to that account. I don't ask folks to do that because I do use mine for other organizations as well. So
my sense is that the challenges with this might be more along, as Ms. Branson pointed out, around the administration of how we actually make this happen. So perhaps that's something we can discuss over email or some other platform. I know that we have some pressing concerns that we'll have to discuss, so maybe we'll just put a pin in that for now. Any other questions about what we've about the administrative updates? And if there are none, we can jump right into the subcommittee updates. We'll start off with the subcommittee on school resource officers. Dalvin, I know you'd mentioned that Jasmine had shared some comments with you ahead of time. If you want to kick us off with that.
Yeah, sure, no problem. And just so I understand, Madam Chair, do you want, we're going to do this and then we'll share the recommendations, right? We're not.
Yeah, so if your subcommittee has anything that's beyond the specific bill, if you want to share any updates around that.
No, nothing. Yeah, so nothing other than the recommendation for the bill. So we pass to the next subcommittee.
Perfect. Emergency response, we have Jen.
Okay, I just had a really quick update, not regarding any specific bill. Do you want that now or later?
Go for it.
In speaking with a guest who's on the call right now, Susan, wave Susan. Susan works for the HOC. She's on the Mental Health Advisory Committee for the county. And in talking with her, we realized I'm discovering there's a lot of our work that's already being done by other people in other places and is well underway by other committees, by mental health groups, by the crisis teams. I mean, so between the people that Susan knows and I know and a couple council members know and you, we're gonna have a meeting on the 28th. I'm looking at my calendar, pulling together a lot of decision makers in the county that are already well into this process of already trying to improve the emergency response for mental health. So a lot of the work is already being done in all these different pockets and individually. So I'm trying to pull everybody together, and Susan knows a ton of people, and then I knew another half, and we just kind of pooled. So we have people from all the emergency response, fire and rescue. We have a representative from the Latino community, and we have the homeless people the homeless population being represented. Lots of council people, lots of folks that have a lot of have made a lot of decisions already, and trying to get everyone together, because we're all redoing the same work so that seems silly to me. So everyone is invited to attend that meeting. I have a Zoom link. I will be sending out a little bit closer to it so it doesn't get lost. But most of these folks have been invited by me and they have no idea who I am. So if you're supposed to be coming to the meeting, tell them to come too. Susan is well known. She's been working with housing for individuals with disabilities for a very long time. So hopefully we'll have a good group. And that is our update for now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We'll move right along to any questions about what Jen just shared. And if there are none, we'll move right along to our next subcommittee on discretionary policing. Any updates not related to the bill discussion, which we'll have time for in just a second.
Well, as you know, we received the data request from MCPD. So what we have done is we're sort of going through our own editing, if you will, of a narrative and recommendations based on what we have learned from that data request, as well as the meeting we had with the with MCPD on the traffic enforcement. So, you know, in the next few days, I guess, we will be able to issue to the group a narrative and recommendations on where we think we should go with this. Anybody, Robin, Justice, you all want to add anything to what I've said?
I think that's spot on, Cherie. I think that the focus will be just trying to also make sure that there's a structure to the recommendation, so that again, that I think that others can potentially look at that as a template. As we look forward, Madam Chair, as you mentioned, we'll be getting into some of the tougher work. How do we also make sure that we have some guidance of how others will be answering and responding, so this way we can bring some level of clarity and consistency across the subcommittees. Thank you, Cherie.
Yeah, I just add one thing that, you know, I think trying to put these recommendations in place will really be an opportunity for the PAC as a whole and other stakeholders to, you know, push back and take a really critical view that this. I think it's important that we don't just have the subcommittees issue stuff and everybody, you know, we all need to push it solidly grounded and really the best we can make. So I would really welcome pushback.
Oops. Thank you, Robin. Sorry about that with my mic. Any questions for the discretionary policing subcommittee? And if not, we can move on to the last one, hiring and discipline. And Nadia, do you want to kick us off?
Oh, well, okay, Nadia, do you want me to read the statement that we came up with?
Go ahead, Alicia.
Yeah, we met several times this month, and we agreed on, and we came to an agreement on a certain narrative or iteration, or I didn't know we'd done this, right, Nadia? You agreed? Yeah, okay, awesome.
We had a
Yeah,
consensus on it. We
yes.
didn't actually have a vote.
But right, I removed, right, correct. Thank you. We concurred on certain items. We did not vote. The subcommittee members, having reviewed Bill 3420, shared comments on the bill. The subcommittee members were in agreement regarding their views on Leober and the need to address community concerns regarding Leober. The members were in agreement on the following points regarding Bill 3420. of primary interest and concern is that Leo.
Sorry,
should be
Alicia, I'll
recused.
just pause you right there. We're going to have a longer conversation about the bills in just a second.
Oh.
Were there any updates not related to the bill from your subcommittee?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, we had the meeting regarding 3420 because we understood that we were asked to bring back a recommendation to PAC, and we also met. We had a presentation by Sarah Dakin of Montgomery County Attorney's Office regarding Internal Affairs Division.
Perfect.
But so then, yeah, Nadia, yeah, okay. I'm sorry. I thought that you did want us. Okay.
We'll get into that in just a second. I want to make sure we get through all the subcommittee updates and give our ex officio folks a chance to weigh in. But first of all, any questions about the meeting with the IAD representative?
Well, I just should say that I've prepared a memo that summarizes the conversation, but I've shared it with the attorney first so that I don't misquote her in a document that might be shared after it's released. So it's not final yet, but we will have a 5 or 6 page summary of our conversation.
Excellent. That sounds like it'll be very useful for us all to take a look at. I want to make sure we have a chance for our ex officio members, Chief Jones or Officer Brewer, to weigh in.
And Madam Chair, I'm sorry, just to interrupt. Since Nadia, I did think she wanted to offer something before I had begun to go into the comments that we had collated together. So can she just?
No, I'm seeing Nadia say that she's okay.
Okay.
Kate, are you here with us?
Yes, I'm here. As a matter of course, I'll defer to the chief first. If the chief has anything or his representative wants to say anything first. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. No problem. Good evening, and just good evening to everyone. And I have nothing to add to the discussion. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you so much.
Okay. Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you. I've said it before, and I'll just say it again. I appreciate everybody's intent to research everything to make sure we're getting a lot of the information, or that you guys are getting a lot of the information. It just, I think it's important to get both sides of everything before any decisions or recommendations are made. My biggest fear is that recommendations are going to be made without getting all the information or both sides of the information. And a recommendation will be made of something that either we're already doing or that doesn't necessarily directly impact Montgomery County Police, that there's outside information that's being used. I know we talk about reading news articles, which is great and it's good information, but it's really just a place to start. It's not research. So there's more research that needs to be done. It is, again, a very, very good place to start, but there needs to be a lot of information gathering, which it does seem like everybody's doing, and especially with these subcommittees and the work. And again, I appreciate that. I just would hate for recommendations and changes to be made, but not getting the desired outcome because not both sides of the information isn't gotten, for example, with the SROs and everything like that. Well, I don't want to speak too much about it because I know that's a huge topic and I'm certainly not trying to get into that. If anybody read the Bethesda magazine today, there's an article in there about that. Again, a great place to start, but some information in there is maybe to seek why are all these principals saying, no, we want to keep them? Has that been explored and other people? And I'm sure it has. I'm just, as an example, because it's something that everybody, even people from outside of the committee that are listening in today are aware of. So my hope is that while it's important to look outside the community to see what's going on outside of Montgomery County, most important is to make sure that the changes that are sought are something that should be changed in Montgomery County. Change is important, absolutely. And again, like I've said before, we're not averse to it, but I think it's really important to make sure the proper change is made to get those proper outcomes. And that can only be done with research from all sides and the proper research. Thank you, guys.
Question to Kate. Did you say that there is an article in Bethesda Beat today?
Yes, sir.
Is it,
I can see if I can pull it and send it. I read it this morning. It was pretty early this morning, I think, that I saw it, maybe 8 or 9 o'clock. I don't know if anybody else has read it.
It's the one about the principals weighing in on, yeah.
That's correct. Yes, Madam Chair.
can you send it to me? Kate?
Yep. I'll do that right now.
Yeah, I think it was just dropped in the chat. Thank you, Nadia. Perfect. Any other questions for either Chief Jones or Kate? I apologize. Should I refer to you as Officer Brewer or Sergeant Brewer, because I don't remember your title?
Kate, please.
Perfect. Any questions for either of them?
I have a question, if you don't mind, Madam Chair.
Please, go ahead.
Justice, for Kate. And Kate, I was about to address you by your proper title, but I will use Kate if that is what you prefer. You made a comment just about research and kind of researching other perspectives. Is there a source in particular that you would also point us to that might be a response from the FOP or from another body, just for, again, trying to be complete in research? I want to be thoughtful about kind of just making sure that I'm listening, rather than you feeling like I've kind of read, because again, I could read that magazine and assume that is the perspective of the FOP when you say, actually, that's not our perspective. And so just wondering if there is a source or how you might recommend us also just making sure that we incorporate some of that information.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, it depends on the topic. So I certainly couldn't talk about everything, obviously, that has to do with police work or patrol, and I don't know that I'm even the one to speak about SROs. I think it would really depend on the topic. And I think I'm just cautioning, as anybody knows, I mean, everybody here has degrees and advanced degrees and stuff like that. Everybody knows research needs to be thorough and do both sides, and not just research to confirm what we are trying to confirm. It has to also try to seek to do the opposite. And if we're proven right, then great. And if that change needs to be made, then fantastic. I think it really, unfortunately, that's not the best answer, but I do think it depends on the topic. And not just from the FOP, but even from if it needs to be Chief Jones or if it needs to be, I just think if principals who are working in the schools say we want SROs, then their voice should be heard too, at least taken in as information. And I just think it should be the same for all topics. Each side needs to be able to be heard. As we all say, it's important to be heard.
And if I may, one more, just to follow on to that, I think the one thing I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not missing is if there's an official response to a bill or to a perspective that is published. And again, we don't necessarily need to kind of go deep on that. I would just want to make sure that that is incorporated and that's also kind of pushed out, because I do recognize that there may be a quote unquote voice that kind of does have a perspective. And again, is more for listening purposes.
Sure. I know they're going to talk about the bill with discipline. I have some opinions about it, but I obviously want to hear what the report is first. So that's kind of hard because the report might already address things that I would have said or had an opinion on. So I think it's important to hear the report first, but that would be the main one that I'm concerned about. Again, with SROs, I don't believe that I'm a subject matter expert in that, but I can answer some questions or at least seek out the people that should be spoken to or gathered information from.
Thank you.
Alicia, I saw a question from you, and then Robin.
And actually, it's not a question, just a quick comment. Thank you very much, Sergeant Kate, for what you've stated. I also would think that it's very important to hear from parents, teachers, and students. And so in the guise of what you're saying, yeah, all of that together.
Certainly. Robin?
Yeah, just something to say, you know, the bill, maybe we'll get to this later, so please, but it's sort of about information. So the bill calls for the removal of SROs. So it's a very binary bill. We have them or we don't. And I would be very interested in hearing from either Kate or Chief Jones whether there are changes to the SRO program that they would be interested in promoting that might address community concerns. You know, what we've heard is it's good to have them. Well, oh no, it's not so good to have them. I mean, there have been complaints, and the sort of official view that at least I've received, having gone through the training and gone through the discussions, the sort of official view seems to be that the SRO program is basically perfect. And I don't,
Robin, I'll put a pin in that just for now. I really want to dig into that.
Okay.
But I want to go through the order of the bills.
Sure.
So since we are getting into that territory, let's go ahead and start with Bill 3420. This was the bill that we had a chance to look at last year. We had a chance to look at the legislative report. The hearing on this bill has already happened. And I believe the documents that were shared with us included testimony from both the representative from the FOP, a representative from NCPD. I believe Chief Jones himself had some remarks that were shared in that document. We are going to be listening to Alicia share what the subcommittee has looked at and is recommending right now.
Thank you very, very much, Madam Chair. And I just had it up. Let me pull it up again. One, sorry. The trials and tribulations of computer literacy. Okay. Yeah, okay. As I stated, the Hiring and Discipline Subcommittee met several times this past month. And for one of those meetings, the entire discussion and the entire meeting was regarding Bill 3420, as we were asked to come back with our comments regarding that bill. The subcommittee members, having reviewed Bill 3420, shared comments on the bill, and the members were in agreement regarding their views on Leober and the need to address community concerns regarding Leober. The members were in agreement on the following points regarding Bill 3420. First, a primary interest and concern is that Leober should be repealed. It impedes the administering of disciplinary measures to address officers' misconduct. It affords officers protections that no other public worker or civil servant enjoys. The officers may choose a hearing by a board comprised of mostly officers. The police chief should have plenary authority. Leober prevents that. Officers are entitled to the same rights under the Constitution of the United States as are all citizens. They are not entitled to more rights than the very citizens they are charged with protecting and whose tax dollars pay their salaries. Another point, the foregoing having been stated, Bill 3420 addresses some of the concerns of the community, reinstating a traditional hearing board with 2 voting public members in cases of citizens' complaints alleging excessive force, authorizing the chief of police to issue a final order based on the hearing board's recommendations and to exercise his right as an employer, meaning the authority to fire the officer. And in parentheses, an ongoing overarching concern has been that the accused officer was able to avoid direct disciplinary decisions by the chief and was able to receive a hearing from a hearing board devoid of members of the public who had any voting power on that board. And our hope is that Bill 3420 addressed that. The voting members of the public should be enough in number that the public, by and through the public voting members, would have a real impact on the final decision in the disciplinary measure to be recommended for an accused officer. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and hear from some of the other subcommittee members. Eric, do you want to share something?
Just that there was I think there was one error that we let get into that statement. It's not that Leober does not allow the chief to have the disciplinary authority. The final disciplinary authority problem in Montgomery County has to do with the way in which Leober is applied in the county. That wasn't a feature of Leober.
Thank you for clarifying. Carolyn, go ahead.
Carolyn?
Caroline.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Caroline.
I just to say to Eric's point, I think actually Leober does also speak to the disciplinary process. So it may be, it's a combination of those things. So I think we are also directing our comments to the disciplinary process as it's laid out in Leober, which is as extensive protections as the statement says beyond what are provided for other public employees.
Anyone else from the subcommittee or any immediate questions or comments?
So I have a question. I haven't had a chance to look at this particular bill lately, but I thought that what this, first, I state the obvious that Leober is a creation of state law, so we're not gonna repeal that, but as I understood it, the difference in Montgomery County is that there is this bifurcated review and assessment of disciplinary process. There's one level, and then there's an option to go to a second, if you will, appellate level, and that this bill, this council bill, essentially eliminates the second level. Is that accurate? Is my understanding accurate? That's for the subcommittee.
I don't believe so. The
And let me just say, I'm sorry, Eric, very quickly. Commissioner Sherry, when we stated that it should be repealed, that was just the thoughts, the comments, our opinion. We understood that we didn't have any power, nor that the county council was going to repeal it. The Maryland House of Delegates, it should be mentioned parenthetically, has decided that it should be repealed.
And I think also, just to Alicia's point, which is to say that I think that the one of the reasons for the county council bill is as a placeholder, in essence, the step that the county can actually take, well, desiring the Leober be repealed.
And so the recommendation of the committee is to, I'm just trying to make this plain. The recommendation of the committee is to support the enactment of 3420. Is that the recommendation? And with no changes or anything, just to support it. I just want to be clear so that people know what they're voting about.
Are we voting today? I did not understand that we were voting today.
Well, I guess that's the other
Chair?
if we're making recommendations, if a committee is making recommendations, then as a matter of process, is the full body voting to consider those recommendations, or what, what's the next step? So it's
Madam Chair,
two-part question.
are we voting today?
For sure. I want to make sure we hear from Eric, who's going to address the comments
Yeah.
about the bifurcated process.
As I understand it, there is a sophisticated fact-finding process that is carried out by the Internal Affairs Division. And then there is a review board that includes executives in the department that review that. And a recommendation is then made to the chief. And after the chief then makes a decision, if there is discipline that is recommended, then the provisions of Leober are triggered, and a hearing board, different than the review board, is brought in. And my understanding is that the bill would not eliminate either of those. It would create a modification with respect to the hearing board. There is a traditional hearing board under Leober, and there's an alternative hearing board under Leober. And my understanding is that in Montgomery County, we use an alternative hearing board,
Right.
and that the decision of that hearing board regarding discipline is final and can overrule the chief at the earlier stage of the process. At least that's my understanding. And I preface all of this by saying that it is quite complex. There are many levels of review involved, and so I'm operating on the basis of what may be an imperfect understanding.
And that's my understanding, and that's what I thought the bill got to, is this alternative hearing board. And that the bill essentially would eliminate that or change that in some way. And that's what I'm trying to get clarification on.
I know Kate has her hand up, and I'm wondering if it might be helpful to hear from either her or Chief Jones, if you wanted to weigh in as well, it would be helpful to hear from you.
If Kate
Yeah.
had her hand up first, I'll let Kate go. I'll yield to Kate.
Go for it, Kate.
Thank you, Chief. So just real quick, a couple of things. LEOBR, nor does our contract give us extra protections in the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment protects us for criminal investigations, which is entirely separate than what the LEOBR addresses. The LEOBR addresses internal investigations, administrative investigations, administrative hearings. So Fifth Amendment doesn't play a part. We are provided the same protection. We're not provided extra protections. They're completely separate. Criminal Fifth Amendment applies. LEOBR protects internal investigations. Mr. Sterling, you're correct. In a nutshell, and Chief can speak to this too, in a nutshell, an investigation, if there's a criminal investigation after it's closed, Internal Affairs starts their investigation. Once the investigation is concluded, they send it to the command staff and IED, who then makes a recommendation. There's an appeal process if they don't agree with the discipline, depending on what that discipline is. If it's above a certain level, they can appeal to a hearing board, either the alternate hearing board, which we're currently entitled to, or the traditional hearing board. So you get either or of those. It's not both. The hearing board that we have, the alternate hearing board that we typically use is one person selected by the chief, one person selected by the FOP, and a third-party neutral arbiter. This is similar to many unions in the county, to include our teachers. It's the same hearing board that they have. It's the exact same setting of a hearing board that they also have. So it's not unique to police. It's very similar to other unions. And I'll defer to the chief too.
No, Kate's explanation is spot on to the part of about what is the difference with the union board. I mean, the hearing boards. All I was going to note was the fact that the officers get to select which hearing board that they would like, whether they want traditional or they want the alternative hearing board. If it is a traditional hearing board, the parties are selected is that I would select 2 of the 3 board members from executive staff, and then one of those members would be a FOP member of equivalent rank, would sit on that particular board for the findings of that particular investigation.
Are there only two? Only 2 members?
There's 3. I
Okay.
select 2 of my executive staff, and there's
Right.
1 additional. So there's 3 members of that board.
Got it.
And the bill, I don't have the bill in front of me right now, the exact text of the bill, but I do believe it allows for public voting members of the public to be on the board and voting and having impact on the disciplinary measure for.
So
Yeah.
Alicia, that already exists in the LEOBR currently, but
Right, but
this would be
not been-
highlighted in this particular bill. And would this particular bill would eliminate the alternative hearing board.
Right.
That is the motive of this bill, is that what it's stating is that it is to eliminate, because in the LEOBR, it was set up for all departments in the state of Maryland to be set up a traditional hearing board as the process. And in I believe it was sometime in the 1990s, there was an additional law that allowed for the counties or governmental jurisdictions to allow for their collective bargaining units to create a alternative hearing board setting. And that is what Montgomery County has done. So this bill would be to eliminate that part, that Montgomery County would not have an alternative hearing board process.
Two quick
And it also
questions.
restores your power as an employer, the police
Correct.
power
Well,
as an employer
So
to.
to speak to that, Alicia, is the fact that when I make a recommendation for discipline, which I make that recommendation prior to the hearing board being held. So we've already done the fact finding, we've already done the statement of charges, And then there's a recommended discipline that goes along with that. What the alternative hearing board does is that they hear, if the officer goes to trial, they hear the evidence and they can override my decision. That's the difference, right? That difference is then my decision for discipline is overridden by the alternative hearing board. That's what's in the law. Right.
Sorry.
So Bill 3420 eliminates that, right?
I'm sorry. Now I'm really confused. So the traditional board cannot overrule Chief Jones? No, you can't. They can, right? They can both overrule.
They cannot.
They cannot.
No. The traditional hearing board hears the evidence. They come up with the findings. I have the final say in discipline. In the alternative hearing board setting, that process is different. You have
so it's kind of a if I'm understanding this correctly, so for the traditional model, you make a recommendation, they look at it, they feed back to you, but they cannot overrule you.
That is correct. Traditional hearing board.
Oh, that's interesting. And so can I ask two more questions? First, what percentage of cases get heard by each type of board at the moment, roughly? I mean, is it like overwhelmingly on the alternate side, or how does that go?
Generally, well, so there's another part of this. So if there is a recommended punishment, for example, what we call summary punishment, which equals to summary punishment equals to the discipline is 3 days of suspension without pay, or a lesser fine, like I think it's what $500, Kate, or something like that below. Then that officer does not have the right to an alternative hearing board. So we'll start there, okay? If it's 3 days or less. But if there's 3 days, if there's more than 3 days of suspension without pay, or a higher, say demotion or dismissal, then the officer does have the right to choose whether they want to have an alternative hearing board or traditional. Generally, when you are in that area of the more extensive punishments, the majority of the officers generally will take the alternative hearing board route. Now, that doesn't mean, and I want to make sure that everybody understands this, it doesn't necessarily mean that every case goes to trial. There are still opportunities for plea agreements, for a lesser punishment, you might say, or agreed upon punishment by both parties, that I will sometimes do, will have an agreement with the FOP that are the attorney representing that member to a lesser penalty in order to avoid a trial, for example.
Yeah.
But again, they do have the option to not agree to a plea and to go to trial as well.
So the second of two questions was, okay, do you collect, or can you provide aggregate data about the cases that go from you to the boards? That is to say, what you recommended, where they went, and what came out of it.
So not that we keep that data as far as you just talk about as the alternative, as far as an alternative hearing board that goes through a trial.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm sort of getting at is, in the end, one of the things that I think has come up many times in this commission already is the need for the community to fully understand outcomes from the process. Right. And we don't really have any outcomes at the moment. I mean, we don't even know how many go to the alternate route, and we don't know what happened to them. So that's the question. Do we have data?
So there's data that we have that for those who have selected alternative hearing boards, and there are outcomes to whether there were findings in those cases, whether there's pleas or whether there was a trial. There's been very few trials. I'll tell you all this. over the past few years, there have been very few trials that we've had for hearing boards. And there's another reason behind that, but that's not necessarily what this committee is about right now.
Well,
But
relevant.
the point being is that, excuse me, recently, we've been able to kind of get this jump started again, where we have these trials that we had one back this past fall, I believe in November, that we completed a hearing board, alternative hearing board. So again, as we move forward with cases that are pending, again, whether an employee resigns, therefore no hearing would be set, excuse me, or if the employee again pled guilty and there was some other, agreement. But again, you would see the breakdown between those who selected the alternative hearing board process versus those who selected the traditional hearing board process.
I guess I would just stress really as strongly as I possibly can that the community really needs to understand the outcome for every case. And that means understanding fully what kind of discipline was imposed for what kind of cases and where the discipline took place in this long process, because we got from Captain Koskinos a description of the use of force data, which told us that out of 1 million interactions with the citizens, there were 5 sustained cases of inappropriate use of force over 5 years. What happened to all the others? I just feel that it's important to know what path they went down, but it's more important to know what happened.
Right.
What was the outcome? That's
Sure.
all.
Okay.
Is there an opportunity for that? Is that information public information on the results of every case?
So from that perspective, as long as the officer's name is not attached to that particular, it is not. That's not what's released to the public. We release charges, we can release findings, and we can release punishment.
Sure.
To some degree, right? But we cannot release the officer's name associated.
No, we don't need that, and we don't even need really the details.
Nor the details of the
Yeah,
investigation.
That's not necessary.
Well, what good would the statistics be if you don't? What are you asking, Robin?
Well, what I'm asking for the data, not for the information about individual cases. I think that's fair. It's fair enough. Those are confidential, at least under current personnel, and I don't really see, in the current
My sense
environment.
is that the results for those are not currently reported on an aggregate level.
I think that's exactly right.
And what we're trying to get at is, while that is something we can know, it is not something we currently do know.
Exactly.
I know that Kate will probably have some very illuminating insights into this conversation. I just want to say, as a matter of process, the hope that Dalvin and I had coming into this meeting is we would have a chance to hear from different members of the commission about how they're feeling about this, that we would take a vote just to get a sense of where the different commissioners are around whether we'll end up endorsing the bill or not, because we don't want to keep dragging this process on. And based off of the conversation and what comments are shared at this meeting, we send it back to the subcommittee to take both their initial review and our comments from this meeting to write it up in some sort of letter, which we will then send to the council president, who was the one who charged us into looking into this bill in the first place.
May I ask, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, did
Please.
everyone on the commission, did you all read Bill 3420? Did you have a chance to review it? Okay.
So I have one more question for Chief Jones. It's my understanding that Montgomery County is the only county that uses this alternative process you've described. Is that accurate or not?
No, ma'am. I think there is, Kate, correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's one other large jurisdiction. I think it's Baltimore County, if I'm not mistaken. I may be wrong on that. And there's another smaller jurisdiction that also utilizes this process. Maybe not in the exact same way, because the law allows for those different jurisdictions to, because it's work with their labor unions in order to come up with an alternative hearing board process.
Madam Chair, if I might just say, I think that one of the most important things about Bill 3420 is the inclusion of voting members of the public, And having listened in on the Maryland House of Delegates board to address police accountability, if I'm using the right term, for their entity, they stated that those hearings were almost non-existent, and they could not. The police department was unable to provide a satisfactory answer as to why those hearings did not convene. They just did not take place. That there was always the provision to have members of the public be on the boards, but they just didn't come to fruition. So I think that that's very important. And I think that, back to Robin's point, one, that perhaps this is a way out of this problem right now, out of this hole that we're in. The community has concerns, and there's a lack of trust. And in order to heal that trust or bring it back, part of that is bringing people into voting positions on these boards. We didn't get,
Madam Chairman.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. We tried to get to hear back from the actual training. Eric reached out to the person who's in charge of training of members of the board, and we got pretty much no response. That to me says a lot. We didn't even get a response regarding training for people to be on the board. So,
Madam Chair.
Yes, Caroline.
I just I wanted to suggest perhaps a modification of the process, because I'm very respectful of the need to move all of these things ahead. But I do think it puts on the commission members perhaps an obligation to vote not feeling really appropriately prepared. Because I have to say, I haven't reviewed all the bills that the other committees have been working on. So perhaps it might make more sense to set a deadline for comments to be sent to the subcommittees. By each of us to the other committees, we can send written comments, and they could then be incorporated into some kind of a statement that we could vote on subsequently, because I really can't vote on the other subcommittees' bills that they were reviewing. So I propose that as an alternative. We could set a very a quick date, maybe by the end of the month or something, to have reviewed all of the bills that the other committees are looking at, and then have a statement sent, and then a vote at the next meeting.
I think that makes sense. I think it's becoming apparent that there's a lot of different factors to consider, and we need to take a little bit more time to consider all the options. Kate, you've been very patient. I definitely want to hear from you before we move forward.
That's what I wanted to make sure.
Clarification.
Yes, please.
Is there not a point in there that where they override the police chief decision? In other words, if the chief made a decision that individual should not be on the force, then somebody could come along and override that?
Bill 3420 eliminates that. Eliminates them being able to override the police chief's decision.
Kate.
Just in the interest of time, I won't get into much based on what everybody said. Just for some points of clarification, though, the chief did mention that we just recently had an alternate hearing board. By policy by directive and by collective bargaining agreement, it does have to be available to the public, which it was. The decision by that alternate hearing board, I think the decision was that in November, I think, Chief, November, December was the decision was handed down, was actually the same that the chief originally recommended. So it's not entirely flawed. Does it need to be looked at? I'm not saying yes or no. But there's some more information, and I think maybe some misunderstandings about some stuff that maybe we, like you said, Madam Chair, that we could maybe discuss at another time. So I'll just defer my time.
The other piece that might be helpful is I know that the materials we looked at had comments from both Chief Jones and from the FOP, but if either of you would like to provide further comments that speak to some of the concerns that came up today, those could also be things we distribute amongst the commission so that they're more targeted towards some of the specific concerns that came up today. With that, maybe let's take a pause and move on to one of the other bills. So to reiterate, we are not going to be taking a vote at this meeting. We can say maybe a week from now. So if folks could take a chance to look at the materials that are provided, we'll go ahead and recirculate the ledge report, the hearing, all the other different elements surrounding this bill. Take a moment to look at it. We'll definitely be asking everyone to vote whether the commission is going to endorse or not. If you have any additional thoughts that you want to include as some sort of a narrative, feel free to do that as well. What I'll ask is if you have comments or questions or concerns you'd like to share with the specific subcommittee, go ahead and email them directly. If it is just any member of the commission emailing the members of any subcommittee, that still falls under our quorum requirement. And I'd rather have your comments get to them as soon as possible rather than it being held up in any kind of process. So if you have comments or questions or concerns about the bill itself, go ahead and send those ahead. In terms of the vote, we'll probably do something like a Google form or something so we can have that in a centralized way, but that won't happen until next week. So for now, please use the time between now and this time next week to look over the bill so that we can vote on it and move forward with this.
So do I understand correctly, Madam Chair, is it coming back to the Hiring and Discipline Subcommittee and we're receiving comments and questions and so forth?
That's correct. So based off of the vote of whether we decide to endorse or not, if it ends up being an overwhelming vote of support or an overwhelming vote against, that makes it a little bit easier for your subcommittee. If it ends up being split down the middle, we'll figure out how to approach it then. We might do some sort of more measured response to the council president. But we'll be referring to the subcommittees to craft that letter from the commission to the council president. So either way would be going back to you, but we're just going to take a little bit more time before it goes back to you to review everyone's comments. Any questions about that process? And if there are none, we can quickly move on to the next one. I'm also realizing we'll be very strapped for time. So let's do this. Let's hold off on the other two subcommittees for now. We'll see if we can find a time, the other two bills for now. We'll see if we can find a time for an additional meeting this month, because I don't want those to wait all the way until February. But let's go over some of the other PAC proposals, and we can come back to them if we have time at the end of the hour. Caroline?
Can I just maybe suggest a subsequent modification?
Sure.
Which is to say, it might be really helpful if the committees have formulated views, if they had a statement that similar to what Alicia so wonderfully put together for ours, that would be really helpful. I'd have to say, I think we were meant to have 6 meetings. We're already going to, and I know this is very important. I want to have as many meetings as are necessary, but I also am sensitive to everybody's time constraints. And the fact that we have a lot of subcommittee work that we're doing in between and a lot of reading. So I think it might be much more helpful, at least for me, I deal well with reading material, to get the statements from the committee with the materials. And then, but not, I think scheduling extra meetings in lieu of reading time and written comments, I just don't think that really will necessarily work, especially with the significant numbers of meetings we're already having.
That's a really good point. I want to make sure we do have at least some time. It might be a shorter one than our usual ones, just to discuss a little bit. But we'll definitely ask all the subcommittees to prepare that that statement the way your subcommittee did. And Carlos, let's make sure in the follow-up to this meeting to include the statement that Alicia read out. I think it's in one of the email threads we have going around. And yes, Justice, we will totally have a documentation of this process. I know that's a lot to visualize. I wanted to have a diagram ready for tonight. My apologies for not getting that together in place. Any other questions on the legislation before we move on to the proposals?
Madam Chair, in addition to the copious amounts of reading that we did, we were consulted by Professor Christy Lopez regarding this very bill that we brought here before you today with our comments.
Thank you so much. And it's clear just from the conversation we just had the amount of work that went into preparing for tonight. So truly hats off to all the members of your subcommittee for putting in that work on our behalf and coming to us with a really solid recommendation. So one of the proposals we have is around just that, is to document this process for legislation a little bit more. This should already have been sent out to you in the email from Carlos, but just to reiterate, when we hear of a new bill regarding policing, the process right now is it will be immediately referred to one of the subcommittees. So far, it's been pretty clear where it belongs, depending on how we've defined the subcommittees. In case it's not completely clear where it belongs, that's when Dalvin and I can do a little bit of triaging and refer it to one of the subcommittees. You'll then have a month to look at the bill, do the necessary research. Likely there will be a ledge report, if not at the moment when we hear of the bill, but soon after. So you can consider all of those sources. And the goal is to create a statement similar to the one Alicia just read out. We'll then share that with the entire commission, along with all the necessary, reading materials around the ledge report, if the hearing has already happened for bills that are on a super quick time period. We'll share all of those materials, and then we'll have a meeting similar to the one tonight, where we'll have a chance to hear from the subcommittee that's looked into it in a bit more detail, hopefully a chance for other folks to ask questions. And as always, having both Chief Jones and Kate around to answer some questions and clarify some questions around process. It will then go back to the subcommittee to draft the letter, and we will, as a commission, vote whether or not to vote to endorse a specific bill. And at any point, if you want to go ahead and email the members of the subcommittee, feel free to do that. Like I said, if it is just you emailing the members of any subcommittee that falls under a quorum requirement, I imagine with all of our work, we won't have time to just send copious amounts of emails back and forth, but do be respectful of our colleagues' time. But we just want to make sure that we don't hold up the process ourselves by creating too many bottlenecks, and make sure that we can communicate amongst ourselves as quickly as we can. Another piece we're trying to work through is creating work plans. So with a lot of help from Carlos, we have a work plan for the commission as a whole. I believe that's already in everyone's inboxes, correct?
I sent it out January 4th. Yeah.
Perfect. So that sort of looks through what we've been charged to do by statute and makes sure that we have time throughout this year to address different parts of that to make sure we're doing what we are supposed to be doing. That includes plans for a public forum. We're tentatively thinking April, May, or early summer, sometime around that period, just because it will take us a few months to put everything together and make sure we can do the necessary outreach, do in-language outreach, as has been pointed out in the past, and get people to show up. And things like the report that we will be publishing on an annual basis. So all of that is included in the commission's work plan. We thought it might be helpful to also have each subcommittee come up with their own work plan to similarly structure their work. So a template has been helpfully created by Carlos. Feel free to put in as much or as little detail as you think is helpful. Once again, this is just a tool for you, so use it as you see fit. And then once we have all the subcommittee work plans, we'll share them with each other. So we ask you in between the meetings, you're going to have either this month or next month to take a chance to look at it so that we can share them amongst each other for our February meeting. We also had a lot of interest in doing a dedicated Q&A session with Chief Jones and Kate. And I think that would be really helpful just because there are so many questions we have on specific topics. For that process, we'll solicit questions ahead of time so that we can provide them to Chief Jones and Kate so they have a chance to look through them and figure out a response so that we can make the most of our time together. That might be one of those meetings that we go ahead and record and then share with folks, just being mindful of capacity and being able to attend in person. Another proposal we had was, given everyone's schedules, if we might want to meet at 6 o'clock just in our respective subcommittees as breakout rooms. And then that way folks have a chance to check in with each other ahead of time. And so that when it comes time to doing the subcommittee updates, it might go more quickly. If there are any holdover items you need to discuss, we can use that time when we all know we have this evening set aside for back work anyways. What was the final item? And finally, we want to make sure that all of the subcommittees are open to the public. One potential challenge with that is if a lot of commissioners show up, we might get to the point where we meet the quorum requirement. And that's when things can get a little tricky. I do not remember if we had a specific suggestion around that. Dalvin or Carlos, do you remember what the recommendation was from our legal counsel?
I don't remember specifically if commissioners could attend a meeting in not in a PAC capacity, like in a non-voting capacity, to be under the quorum requirement. I know that so I'll have to follow up with an attorney on that. But the other question was about, so if a subcommittee holds a meeting, would other commissioners have the ability to ask questions? So non-subcommittee members ask questions during that subcommittee meeting. And so one of the suggestions was that either they would not be able to, or they would have to hold their questions to the very end after all of the subcommittee members were able to ask questions and deliberate because it's their meeting. So those were just two of the issues that we were talking about.
It just dawned on me that we are kind of getting into the Open Meetings Act possible issues, because if we're having the subcommittee meetings open to commissioners, then we could easily achieve a quorum. Let's say if a lot of commissioners decided to attend one particular subcommittee's meeting. So since we're trying to reach the public, why don't we focus on that? And as we learned from our legislative attorney, that we were fine, we were well within the Open Meetings Act requirements by meeting as subcommittees, because we're only like 4 or 3 people, 4 or 3 commissioners per subcommittee.
That's a good point. I don't know if we've had this issue come up already. I don't know if any subcommittees has any subcommittee had commissioners who are not on the subcommittee show up so far?
No, it was just something that came up as we talked about it. The subcommittee
right
had talked about it. So hiring discipline.
For sure. Got it. So the possibility came up in your conversation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, then for now, let's just go ahead and say, unless there's a burning desire you have to show up to one of those, let's try and avoid that so we don't get into any complications. Do any of, Carlos, I know the agenda says voting to formalize those processes. Do any of those require a vote?
The only one that I really see requiring a vote would be the referral process for legislation. So if the PAC if everyone is in agreement that if a bill is introduced, then it would directly go to a subcommittee, and then they would have 30 days, and then they would make a recommendation, that whole process.
Let's hold off on, that would be a good thing to vote on. Let's hold off on that until we have it written up, so it's a bit less confusing. I know Justice made a point about let's document that process so it's easier for everyone to follow. And then we can take a formal vote on that at the next meeting. Does anyone have concerns about referring legislation directly to subcommittees? Great. Glad we're all on the same page. Do folks have any new business? that they'd
No,
like to share?
can I just say a couple things? So we're sort of coming up with standard operating procedures as we go along, which is fine and dandy. But I need to reiterate that these processes and procedures really do need to be in writing. And we do in fact need to vote on them. We can't have an, you know, we can't have an ad hoc kind of process. Let's just be sure that, you know, this is we've discussed tonight about 3 different kinds of processes. Okay, we've talked about the work plan, we've talked about the subcommittee meetings, and we've talked about the referral of legislation. So, you know, all these things need to be voted on by the commission as a commission, which is fine and dandy. I'm just, you know, kind of making it plain that this becomes the model, not only for the rest of our term, but, you know, potentially for whoever serves on the next commission. I would also like to say that, you know, our committee was assigned Bill 4520. We do have a statement that we've agreed to. So what do you want us to do with that? Shall we send it to Carlos and he can distribute it? Because we have a statement and we have recommendations. I don't know if the people who worked on the other bill also have a statement and recommendations, you know, but, you know, we certainly do. So I'd like to get that, you know, I'd like to get that off our plate, basically. And if people have, you know, questions about that, I'd like for them to be able to ask those questions.
Certainly, I want to be mindful of time, which is why I wanted to hold that off until next week. To your other points, Ms. Branson, I think voting on the work plan would be a great idea. And we can certainly do a vote to see whether having monthly subcommittee meetings that are open to the public, we can have a vote on that as well, just to make sure that we have that formality. I'm certainly open to that. If there aren't any new business items, I'd love to use this time, the remaining time we have, to just hear the statements from the 2 subcommittees, because that'll at least get us thinking about the legislation. Do you want to go ahead and kick us off with the with Bill 4520?
Sure. Bill 4520 was introduced in November. The bill is currently sponsored by every member of the council. Therefore, it's highly likely to pass. According to the staff report on the bill would require MCPD to collect and annually report on certain demographic data regarding individuals stopped, including stop and frisk, that does not result in a citation or arrest. Individuals searched, cited, arrested, or the subject of a use of force incident by the department. That data would include race, ethnicity, gender, and any other demographic information voluntarily provided by the detainee. It would also include, it would also require MCPD to post data on Data Montgomery about certain types of incidents, including use of force, field interview reports, juvenile citations, criminal citations, including trespass citations, alcohol beverage violations, possession of marijuana violations of less than 10 grams, and smoking marijuana in public places. The staff of the council noted that this data may assist MCPD in its efforts to build capacity to use policing data to advance best practices in a constitutional way, and with community policing. Given that this type of data, and this is the recommendation of the committee, given that this type of data would provide additional information on how discretion in policing affects the community and may shed light on questions of implicit, explicit, or systemic bias, we believe we should urge the council to pass this bill. And if passed by the council in its current form, we believe we should urge the county executive to sign on to the bill. So that's our report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for sharing. Would you be able to put that text into the chat box just so we can all take a look at it?
Oh, no. It's way beyond my technical capacities. I am happy to send you the document you know, when the meeting's over and it can be distributed. You know, I'm not.
I can do it. I'll dig it up.
Okay.
Thank you, Radha.
I have a question. On that bill, where is the what's the name of the other group that's where there's 80 people on? Where are they on that bill? And you know,
The Reimagining Task Force, I don't know if they have weighed in on this particular bill or not. I know that they are supposed to be, you know, coming up with their report, I guess end of this month or sometime in February, they've said. So I assume that, you know, the general issues raised will be addressed by them, but I don't believe that they are, you know, that within their purview is looking at individual bills.
yeah, the reason I was asking, I'm just wondering if they are going to add stuff on or take stuff off, you know, where
They could. I mean, they could, and you know, quite frankly, we, you know, if we agree to support this, support passage of this bill, you know, in our annual report or whatever we, you know, plan on doing, we could definitely request different kinds of demographic information that we think would be helpful. So I think this is basically a starting point.
Yeah, I was also just wondering, with all the things that are being asked for in data, it sounds like the department is going to have to hire somebody, a whole nother division or department, just to keep up with the data.
Yeah.
And that may be, or they may have to retrain officers in order, you know, to gather this data as they encounter people. I mean, but that's, you know, that's a really, you know, I understand that it may represent an administrative hurdle initially, but quite frankly, any kind of changes that we're recommending may represent an administrative hurdle initially.
Madam Chair, I also looked at Bill 4520, and you're taking questions and comments now from the commissioners, correct? All the commissioners. And I felt like it's what the doctor ordered: transparency to restore community trust, keeping of data and posting of the data regarding race, ethnicity, gender, medical pre-existing conditions should perhaps be included as they might impact physical well-being, injury sustained by a detainee, you know, not relating to any particular person, of course, due to HIPAA, but, you know, data in general regarding, you know, what kinds of injuries officers encountered and they were faced with when arresting individuals. I think that that's a good thing. And my only drawback was MCPD would be required to present data annually to Montgomery County Council. Why only annually? Why not, you know, more than just once a year?
My understanding is that the bill calls for the data to be made available through the open data portal as well. it might be a good thing to clarify that that data needs to be uploaded effectively in real time, not on an annual basis.
Certainly. I think maybe this might be a good closing point for tonight's meeting. I can see we already have a few commissioners dropping off. So let's save this conversation for when we're all together again. Please go ahead and share any of these thoughts and concerns with the members of the subcommittee, and we will get back to you very soon. Once again, really appreciate the work that you've all been putting in on these bills. Let's keep this going forward, and hopefully we'll have our first set of letters off to the council very soon.
When is our next meeting?
We have a next meeting scheduled for February, but what we will try and do is see if we can find time either the week before that or a couple of weeks before that, just so we can talk about the two bills in a bit more detail.
Okay, because the reason I was asking is, you know, a lot of people got heavy Zoom schedules, and we're just trying to see when, you know, we sometimes we fit in 2 Zooms in on the same date. So
for sure, we'll do our best to find a time that works for everyone. All right. And with that, good night, everyone. Thank you all so much. See you at the next one.
Thank you. I like the name RGT. I like that, Robin. RGT.